Max Verstappen and Mohammed Ben Sulayem dominated the headlines in the last race in Jeddah, where it was visible that the Dutchman was quite irritated when the president of the International Automobile Federation got into an altercation with Max at the end of the race. This is just one more step in the wrong direction for the most controversial president in the history of the International Automobile Federation. And the question that hangs over our heads now is whether Ben Sulayem should leave his post amid all the negativity directed at him. There are definitely not enough words to describe the narrative that has been preached against Mohammed Ben Sulayem, but it is also not without reason. We have already seen that he does not have the respect of the sport's top stars, including Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. And in Jeddah, this became quite evident. Ben Sulayem repeatedly tried to get noticed by walking behind the drivers during the collective interview, and at one point tried to force a conversation with Lewis Hamilton, to which the seven-time world champion paid no attention and simply kept walking. Now, amidst all this controversy, the conversation that the president of the International Automobile Federation had with Max Verstappen after the end of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix is something that has generated a lot of discussion about whether Ben Sulayem is not simply trying too hard to keep his position. Rumors have emerged that he would have told Verstappen that he was prohibited from speaking negatively about the controversial first lap in Jeddah, in which the Red Bull driver received a penalty of 5 seconds. However, it was visible that Max did not like the conversation at all, and therefore made a point of expressing his feelings loudly and clearly to Ben Sulayem. On the other hand, what we can see is that few drivers are respecting the orders of the governing body with regard to the stance on swearing. The fact that this decision was not supported by the entire International Automobile Federation shows that the president does not have the full support of the members below him, something that was evidenced by the recent restructuring and dismissal of employees who were not satisfied with the way he acted on this issue. Verstappen denied the rumors that he had been reprimanded by Ben Sulayem regarding the swearing on the radio on the first lap, but did not want to comment further on the matter because he clearly stated that people cannot handle the truth. Furthermore, he said that he does not want to talk about the topic anymore for one reason: he would be penalized due to the strict policies of the International Automobile Federation. And this may be another reason why the president's time is practically up. What needs to be mentioned is that the culmination of this issue is the holding of a meeting that should revolve around the presidency of the International Automobile Federation. Everything that is currently happening has a very negative impact on Ben Sulayem's chances of remaining in office, and instead of being re-elected, as he hopes, it is likely that he will be replaced. To understand a little better the internal turmoil in the Federation, we need to hear from some important figures, such as the former vice president of the entity, Robert Reid. He was not the first member to leave his post recently, and it is highly likely that others will follow the same path due to the growing instability in the team. There are reports that Ben Sulayem is firing people or, at the very least, placing them in unsustainable positions to force them to resign due to their beliefs. If this is confirmed, we will be facing a massive revolution behind the scenes of the International Automobile Federation. There have been quite direct insults to the sport, and when a proposal from the Saudi fund emerged to buy the rights of Formula One from Liberty Media, a proposal that was immediately rejected by the American company, Ben Sulayem stated that Formula One should not overestimate itself. This statement harmed potential future partnerships and was very poorly received. But, as I mentioned earlier in this video, it is just another stain on Ben Sulayem's reign. It is worth remembering that there was an event in which two very important members of the International Automobile Federation were prevented from participating in a crucial meeting of the World Motorsport Council because they refused to sign a non-disclosure agreement, the so-called NDA, something that Ben Sulayem strongly defended. One of these members was the former Vice President Robert Reid, and the other was David Richards, Chairman of Motorsport UK. This was an important meeting, as one of the main topics discussed was the mandatory implementation of the two-stop rule in Monaco, which is now official. Even so, forcing participants to sign a non-disclosure agreement makes many question what the true interests of the International Automobile Federation are. Of course, This is good for maintaining the confidentiality of meeting, but the Federation's reign is getting worse and worse, and the lack of transparency in its actions has been criticized by the Grand Prix Drivers Association, or more precisely, by George Russell. In the case of Robert Reid, the reason for his departure from the entity is quite clear. He simply did not agree with the decision-making process. Reid believes that the Federation is currently striving for standards with which he does not agree, which makes the races less competitive and adds a lot of unnecessary politics to the sport. It is evident that all these dismissals and internal changes will be major arguments against Ben Sulayem at the meeting intended to decide his future, and he fears losing his position due to these situations. He believes that, in addition to Verstappen, he is one of the most hated figures by the British media, which contributes to the negative narrative surrounding his presidency. But, as already mentioned in this video, it does not help that the Grand Prix Drivers Association has also spoken out extremely critically against his management. George Russell called for much more transparency from the International Automobile Federation, stating that the drivers and members of the association are not satisfied that they have no idea what happens behind closed doors. Delving even deeper, Russell said that, unfortunately, every time news comes from that side of the sport, it is not really a surprise, which is a great shame, as these are very respected people with a long history in motorsport. As we keep saying, it is a shame to see this happening, and we hope that stability returns as soon as possible. More importantly, Russell feels that the drivers, who risk their lives week after week, have no voice in this story. Everyone knows that things are going in the wrong direction. That is not the question. The question is whether anyone can do anything to prevent the situation from turning into an even bigger disaster. Speaking about the lack of power of the drivers and what he believes should change immediately, Russell said that it is reaching a point where these situations happen so frequently that, even trying to get involved, the drivers cannot make much progress, and everything seems to proceed unstably. He was honest in saying that the drivers are losing impact on these decisions and need to trust the teams and Formula One to work together with the Federation and find common ground. And if they can help, they want to be there. But often it seems that things only go in one direction. All the drivers place complete trust and faith in Stefano Domenicali and Formula One, knowing that they will work together with the teams to find solutions. It is in everyone's interest to build something from all this, and for there to be stability and collaboration going forward. We just want collaboration. It makes no sense for us to be fighting over these issues. And here we are, seeing the president of the International Automobile Federation treating the governing body as if it were his own backyard. It would be very good if everyone reminded him that there is a lot going on behind the scenes. Yes, there is an authority that needs to be respected. But if that authority turns into a regime, it becomes easy for the drivers to become irritated and dissatisfied with the leadership of the International Automobile Federation. Even the recent change in regulations, which received a lot of criticism, is not helping the entity at all, especially since the requests for the return of V10 engines generated false hopes about the future of the sport. And, to conclude in a very up-to-date manner, Russell said that this is a topic that has been dragging on for quite some time, about 6 months to be more precise, and that the more attention is paid to it, the more undeserved attention it will receive. Anyway, Ben Sulayem understands that his presidency is threatened, and regardless of whether he accepts it or not, that is the situation. So with all this in mind, have we seen the last act of the most controversial president in the history of the International Automobile Federation? Tell us in the comments. And after that, don't forget to click on the video that will appear on your screen now.